Thanks. The recording has started. We'll be recording the session and it will be available on YouTube soon. Please remember to introduce yourself briefly if you are putting across any questions during our question answer session. This is where you'll find the raise hand icon. So if you have a question while the speaker is presenting his session, you can just raise hand and we'll make a note of that and invite you to unmute yourself and start asking your question. Before the beginning, before the session starts, we would like you to mute yourself. This is where you will find the mute icon. And when we ask you to unmute yourself, this is where you will find the unmute icon. That's the same icon and change over to unmute, right? Now, a little bit about peer review. Peer review is evaluation of scientific, academic, or professional work by your peers. That is by people who have similar competency as you. Not necessarily the same competencies, but similar to your competency. And this is a brief about how the publication process works. When you submit your paper to the journal, the editor reviews it first and he may make a decision about your paper, and there may be a desk rejection, or the editor may decide to send it to an associate editor if there is one. And the associate editor may make a recommendation based on which the editor can make a decision. If they find it suitable for peer review, they will send it to a number of reviewers. This number varies from journal to journal. They will send it to peer reviewers who will review the paper, and on what basis they will review that I think Sanjay would be covering on his during his presentation about what are peer reviewers expected to look at when they're reviewing a paper. And based on their reviews as well as recommendations, because peer reviewers will also recommend, the editors can pass it on to the associate editors can pass it on to the editor, and editor makes a decision about the paper and may decide to reject the paper or to accept the paper with or without modification. Now, a brief about the peer review week. Peer review week is a community-led global event which was started in 2015, and it celebrates the role of peer review. So different organizations have been conducting the peer review week activities annually. This is usually in the third week of September that they conduct these activities. The purpose of peer review week is to emphasize on the role that peer reviewers play in the scholarly communication and showcase what editors and reviewers do, what is the difference between an editor and a reviewer, their roles and responsibilities, and to share the research done about peer reviews and advanced best practices in peer review. Or also highlight what is new in peer review, how the peer review process is changing. So I'm sure Sanjay would talk about that in more details. The theme for this year's peer review week is research integrity, creating and supporting trust in research. We will hear more from Sanjay about this. The steering committee of peer review week comprises of a lot of organizations and institutes. These are some, and there are some very well-known ones like the JAMA, Orchid, Springer, Wiley, and even Elsevier. They are all involved in the peer review week celebrations. Hazlo is participating for the second year now. This is the website where you can go and find out a little about our company. We help bring research and health research and health facts to your target audience, whether they are the lay public or they are your peers, whether you want to bring your research to the peers who publish and who are reading your technical articles in the journals, or to lay public. And we also conduct medical writing and health communication training programs, and some webinars like this one. We will be coming back again next month with an open access webinar. Details will be shared later. And if you want to know more about Hazlo's activities, please feel free to write to me at this email ID. This is me. I'm the co-founder and director of Hazlo Consultancy Private Limited. I have over 22 years of experience as a medical writer, reviewer, editor, and trainer. I speak on health communications and medical writing at various institutes, Indian and international conferences. Author of some research papers, review articles, textbook chapters, books, blogs on different aspects of medical writing. and I've been a referee for several Indian and international journals, especially for articles related to medical writing and research integrity. This is the program. We'll be talking about what editors expect from peer reviewers and how to build trust in research. SanjayAPai is our speaker. Why did we choose Dr. SanjayAPai as one of the speakers? Sanjay, this is the reason I decided you should be a speaker this time. As an outgoing executive editor of Indian Journal of Cancer, he mentioned in one of his publications that editing and specifically the art of getting good referee comments, that is peer review comments on manuscripts submitted to the journal, is a Sisyphean task. What is Sisyphean task? That's Sisyphus was a Greek who was cursed by God. He would roll up a boulder over a mountain, and every time he would reach close to the top, the boulder would go down again, and he had to redo the task again and again. Now, Sanjay also mentions in this particular article that enthusiastic referees seem to be almost non-existent. Why are editors unable to find enthusiastic referees, and what are they actually looking for in referees? That's what Sanjay is going to talk about. A brief about Sanjay. Sanjay did his graduation from Grant Medical College, Bombay, and then his MD in pathology from Tata Memorial Hospital, where he later continued on staff. And then he was in Manipal Hospital in Bangalore, and since 2008 has been at Columbia Asia Referral Hospital, which is now called the Manipal Hospital, Yeshwanthpur. He has been associated in an editorial capacity with Indian Journal of Medical Ethics since 1996. That's a long time. And he is also an editor of the National Medical Journal of India since 2000, an executive editor of Indian Journal of Cancer from 2017 to 2020, on the editorial board of Current Science from 2017 to last month. Sanjay has recently been elected as one of the directors of World Association of Medical Editors, that's WAME. His medical interests are history of medicine, ethics, research, and publication, and of course, surgical pathology. So congratulations, Sanjay, on being selected as one of the directors of WAME. And welcome, you take over now. I'll just stop sharing and you can start sharing. Thank you,
Natasha. The first thing I need to do is share.
Just take your cursor to the bottom tab, and then you'll see a green screen, a green button.
Yeah.
Just click on that. A green button that says.
Okay. Can you see the first?
You can see your screen. Yes. Wonderful. Yeah.
Okay, great. Perfect. Thanks, Natasha, for inviting me for this bhashan today. And I shall be talking to you guys on the topic of what editors expect from referees. Now, honestly, this is a topic for which you can talk for a couple of days, but all I have is about 45 minutes. So I'm going to talk on certain aspects of this topic only. And okay, I am a pathologist at Manipal Hospital, Yeshwanthpur. That's my email ID for those of you who want to email me later on and ask questions which might strike you after we have logged out. You're most welcome. I'm fairly prompt at responding. And how do I get to the next slide? I seem to be having a problem here.
Just move your cursor a little bit and then click. Maybe you'll be able to do that. Yeah.
Okay. Like Natasha said, I do have no financial conflict of interest. Unfortunately, I'm not paid for any of my talks or for editing or for refereeing, obviously, or for writing, such is life. The journals that I'm associated with are the Indian Journal of Medical Ethics, National Medical Journal of India currently, and I have been associated with these two journals. And the reason I put these out here as possible conflicts of interest is you might find me praising these journals at some stage by error or intentionally, and those are conflicts of interest because these are the journals I'm associated with. I mentioned this to a friend last week that I'd be talking at this meeting, and he asked me what is peer review week. He had no idea, so I thought I'd put in a couple of slides on this, but I see that Natasha, being the opening batsman, has beaten me to it. But just for those who came in late, everybody knows that peer review is crucial for formally scholarly communication, and hence a group of publishers and scientific societies and universities came together in 2015 and decided to have 1 week where they would celebrate peer review and discuss the issues that crop up from time to time. And every year they have a specific theme. And the theme for this year, 2022, is creating and supporting trust in research. And among the things that they wanted to discuss is how can the scholarly community demonstrate research integrity and enhance understanding of peer review and promote trust in peer review processes. And that's what we plan to do. Here's this lovely definition of science which Linus Pauling made. And Linus Pauling, as you know, is a 1954 chemistry and 1962 Nobel Peace Prize winner.
Sorry, Sanjay, I mean,
Yeah.
need to interrupt you a little bit. Can
Okay.
you be a little louder?
Okay.
Little.
Okay.
Others, please mute yourself.
I thought you came here the gate and then did something and again came back.
You opened the gate.
Only one of us can talk at a time. Okay, can you hear me now? Is this better? Science is the search for truth. Natasha, is that better? Natasha?
Yes, sir, it is better, sir.
Is it better? Okay.
Yeah, it's
Science,
better. Thank you.
Science is search for truth. And I like the word truth because right from school, we've been taught that science is the search for the truth. And so some time ago, I spent time looking up the definition and finding out who it was who first used this definition. It was Linus Pauling. And from truth, I'm going to go to the next slide, which, well, truth to trust is just next door, right? I'm certain most people in this forum have been using and doing Wordle every day and probably getting frustrated at times. But here is what truth to trust is, just one step away, and it is really the same thing. They're synonyms. And since science is the search for truth, trust, which is what this year's theme for peer review week is, it fits in, it makes sense. Peer review, unfortunately, has had a crisis in the recent past. Why is there a crisis? There are multiple reasons for this, and this is what Natasha alluded to. First and foremost, there is a lack of sufficient peer reviewers. Why is there a lack of sufficient peer reviewers? If you look at it this way, you start research in your mid-20s when you're a postgraduate or when you're a graduate student perhaps, and then you do research all your life until you retire in your mid-60s. So you have researchers from the age of, let us say, 25 to 65, whereas peer reviewers are generally, the papers are sent to generally fairly senior people to peer review. And so you have peer reviewers who start from the age of maybe 30 or 35 or even later and go on up to their 60s. So what that means is you have more researchers than peer reviewers. So that itself leads to a lack of sufficient peer reviewers compared to the number of papers which come in. Secondly, it's no secret that over the last 30 or 40 years, there has been an explosion of scientific research. Now, not only has there been an explosion of scientific research just because of the mere interest in science, there's also been things like the publish or perish, which has come into everybody's life. Now, for instance, the National Medical Council of India expects physicians to publish papers if they want to get their promotions in medical schools. Thus, even those who are not really interested in research are now forced to do research. And so you have more research papers out there. COVID-19 led to a further explosion of scientific research, which everybody knows about. Further, until about 25 years ago, all journals were the standard paper-based journals. But once web-based journals came in, it became easier to start off journals. And the internet has, of course, made it very, very easy to start off journals. And so you have more journals out there than you had 25 years ago. To add to, but at least web-based journals are legal. You got this problem of predatory journals, which have also come in now, or pseudo journals, where, well, I'm sure all of you get mails every day from predatory journals, the International Journal of Astrology, Astronomy, Pathology, and Medicine, and such other journals. Predatory journals came in to make fast money, to make a quick buck at the expense of researchers. When they learned that people were detecting that they were predatory journals because papers were not being sent out for peer review, they have now introduced this peer review business where they say, we'll give you a peer review. They claim to have peer reviewers, but they actually don't. Nevertheless, it is possible that when they send out some of those papers for review, some people who are unaware that they are predatory journals actually waste their time on predatory journals referring papers. The next problem we have is that of paper mills, and I'm going to come to that sometime in my talk later on. A bigger problem, especially in the last 2 years of COVID, has been that politics and polemic has replaced unbiased science. And I suspect the reason that this theme came in for this year's peer review week is because of the crisis that took place with the 2020 COVID-19 papers in the Lancet and in the New England Journal of Medicine. To my surprise, I discovered that given the importance of peer review in science and indeed in scholarly literature, there is relatively little literature on the subject itself. There is, in fact, extremely little on the role of the referee in creating trust in the peer review process. In other words, for this talk that I've been asked to give, there is very, very little information on the net. So much of this will be my own thoughts, coupled with, of course, some information that I've picked up from the net. This is a paper which I published a couple of years ago, How to Referee a Paper and Save the World. And like I spoke to Natasha, when you talk about what editors expect from peer reviewers, this is what they expect: how to referee a paper. And this article of mine tells you the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, what exactly the editor wants to know. But this is a kind of a practical paper. And what I'll be talking to you today will be a little more philosophical kind of a thing. And I'll be telling you about things which are not mentioned in this paper. And of course, the most important thing is my talk has to be related to the theme of this peer review week. Another excellent article which I found is by Dr. Rakesh Datta, who is editor of the medical journal Armed Forces India. He wrote this lovely article called Peer Review Pearls and Pitfalls, and he has given 10 rules, 10 commandments. He has given,
थोड़ी देर में फोन कर सकते हो क्या, एक आध घंटे में?
Please mute yourself.
एक वेबिनार अटेंड कर रही हूँ. बाय.
Okay. Rakesh Datta has given 10 commandments in this Journal of Ayurveda and Integrative Medicine. And I strongly recommend that all of you take a look at this article. You'll really benefit by reading it. A little bit on the history of peer review. The Journal des Sciences, which is a French journal on the humanities, and the Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society of London were the first journals to introduce some kind of peer review. This was in 1665, which is to say 350 years ago. And then in 1731, the Medical Essays and Observations, which was published by the Royal Society of Edinburgh, was the first fully peer-reviewed journal. So peer review has been around for, like I said, 350 years. And yet, there are people who talk about pros and cons. Is it good, bad, or ugly? And there are pros and cons to peer review. The pro is it improves the paper, or it acts as a filter and separates out bad science, in our case, or bad humanities, or whatever the subject is. The other pro is it may detect research misconduct. The cons, of course, on the other hand, are that it is time consuming, because after all, the author sends the paper to the journal, the editor sends it out for refereeing, and the referee takes anywhere from 3 weeks to, well, sometimes even 6 months to referee the paper, and so it's time consuming. A major issue that has been pointed out is that peer review is not reproducible. You can send the same paper to 2 different referees, and sometimes you can send it to the same referee a few months later, and you'll find that the comments are entirely different. But then it's subjective. Peer review is subjective, we know that. And the last con is, it has been pointed out, as with the Lancet and the New England Journal of Medicine paper on COVID, it often does not detect research misconduct. But having said that, I think all good things in life are time consuming. Most things in life are subjective. And as for the fact that it often does not detect research misconduct, the fact remains that often it does detect research misconduct. So I'm clearly on the side of peer review. So what's the role of peer reviewers? The peer reviewer has 3 roles. It is to assist the editor, to assist the author, and to advance knowledge in that field. And the peer reviewer advances knowledge in that field by well, 1 and 2, by assisting the editor and assisting the author. I found this put better by someone on the web. And Alice Palmer in a blog says, the best piece of advice I ever received from an editor is make my life easy. And yes, that's what the editor is doing. The editor has received a paper about which he, she, or they, and I'm being politically correct now, he, she, or they do not know how to interpret. The editor thinks it's probably a good paper, but is not sure. And therefore, the paper is sent out to a referee who's an expert in the field, and that expert has to make the editor's life easy by either accepting or rejecting or giving comments on how to improve that paper. The second thing that Alice Palmer says is reviewers are guided to put yourself in the place of the author. Remember, the author has worked for months on that paper and is submitting his or her or their, well, it's usually there because it's a group of authors, right? They are the best paper possible that they can write up, the best research that they have done, and they have sent it to me, they have sent it to you in all earnest, and it is your duty to put yourself in the place of the author and think, it's the golden rule. Put yourself in that person's shoes. See how you can improve that paper, if the paper is worth improving, if the paper can be improved. Unfortunately, of course, there are times when the paper is really bad or just not up to the standard of the journal, in which case you have to diplomatically tell the author what is wrong. What I do as a referee is I even suggest possible journals that the author can send it to. I say it's an interesting paper, but perhaps you got the wrong journal. You might want to submit it to these journals. Alice Palmer also has that peer review is essential but not infallible. So I think this is perfect. It's essential, but it's not infallible. But nothing and nobody in life is infallible. What the editor expects from the referee is the truth and nothing but the truth. You have to be diplomatic, but you have to write out the entire details. You have to give the entire stuff, all the comments that have gone through your mind when you read that paper, everything that can improve the paper. Or if you feel that the paper is not good enough to accept, you have to explain that to the editor and say why it has to be rejected. The first thing that you have to do as a peer reviewer, you have to declare conflict of interest. You have to state all. And by when I state all, what I mean is you have to state all possible conflicts of interest, including and especially those which might embarrass you at a later stage when it comes out that you did not mention it as a conflict of interest. You have to look, sometimes looking at the paper, you can identify the author of the paper. And since almost all over now, papers are supposed to be double-blinded. The author does not know the referees. The referee does not know who the author is. Suppose you recognize the author of the paper. It's best to get back to the editor and state that you recognize the author or authors of the paper, and would you still want me to referee the paper? Most often you'll probably find that the referee will say, yes, I believe that you can be unbiased despite the fact that the authors of this paper are either your competitors or colleagues, ex-colleagues, friend, enemy, family, frenemy, whatever, and go ahead and do it. I'd like to give an example of how this has happened in one of my papers. In a paper that I got as a referee some years ago. I received a paper from an editor and I instantly recognized the paper, recognized the data, and I got back to the editor and said, I know who's written this paper for sure. So I think you should send it to somebody else. And the editor said, no, it's perfectly okay if you recognize the author. I believe you'll be unbiased enough to give suitable comments on this paper. Go ahead and do it. So although the person was either a competitor, colleague, ex-colleague, friend, enemy, or family, and I'm not going to tell you what, because, I can't tell you what, right? So I was able to give comments and the editor took an appropriate decision. When I see family, I'm reminded of another incident. When I was editor a couple of years ago, I received a paper on a specific topic and I sent it out to a referee and the referee sent back comments, excellent paper, please accept. Now, those are, of course, lousy comments because excellent paper, please accept tells me nothing. I need to know why it's excellent, why should it be accepted, and it is very, very rare for a paper to be so good that can be accepted without any change. So my first thought was, this is a lousy comment, I'll have to do something about it. Then I said, something's funny. I said, this name sounds familiar to me. And so I did some research and then I found out that the referee I had sent it to was the wife of the author. Now, it is entirely possible, of course, that husband and wife stay together, work in the same department, and conduct research which is not known to the other. But I think it's extremely unlikely that even over the dinner table, they've never mentioned this to each other. And so I thought this was an example of a huge conflict of interest, which the referee did not tell me. Subsequently, I've never sent a paper to this person as a referee. Okay, deja vu. And to those of you who think I've goofed up and it's deja vu, it's not. I'm really talking deja vu. I'm punning on this. Deja vu, as you know, is when you get this feeling that you've seen something somewhere before you, but you can't quite place it. This deja vu is when you see something before and you know exactly where you've seen it. And this has happened to me on more than one occasion, where the editor of a journal sends you a paper and you send it back to him or her with comments. And in these couple of occasions, what has happened is I have sent in comments saying, I don't think this is a very good paper and I think it should be rejected. And the referee has gone and the editor has gone by my comments and rejected the paper. And less than a week later, I received the paper again, but from another journal. Now, it's good for the ego to know that two editors think that you're the expert in that field and send you the paper not knowing that it has been seen by you. I could, of course, reject the paper again, but it's not fair. On both of these occasions that I've received such papers, I have sent it back to the editor and said, look, I have seen this last week and I have rejected it because I don't think it's a good enough paper. Nevertheless, it's not fair to the author if the same person rejects it again, because if I'm mistaken or if I'm biased and have rejected it in some way, it's unfair to the author. So I suggest you send it to entirely different referees and take their opinion. In one of those cases, I must say that the second referee felt that it was good enough to accept and got published, and I'm perfectly okay with that. But I still think the paper wasn't very good. I'm being biased. The usual rules apply. Like I said, the referee must think like an author. That is absolutely important. That's the reason I've said it twice and I'm saying it a third time. The referee must think like an author. Unless you think like the author, you will not be able to come out with the best comments possible. You have to think like the author. Remember that. At my stage, perhaps I don't need to use checklists as much, but certainly when you're beginning of your peer review career, it's worthwhile looking up checklists. And this is a website where I found two checklists, very, very good checklists on what a peer reviewer needs to look up, what points he or she needs to consider while reviewing a paper. But in very brief, and I'm going to go into this in very brief only because I have to talk on other aspects of peer reviewers. Is the research question relevant? Are the methods and methods okay? And this method and methods part is very important because the maximum reason for rejection of a paper is on the methods and methods part. The researcher does a terrific study, but there is fundamentally wrong in the materials and methods. The wrong statistical test has been used, or the wrong cohort of patients have been used, and so on. And so when your materials and methods are wrong, the whole thing falls through. Are there any legal issues? Are there any ethical issues? Are there contradictions in the argument? Is there something that the author says in the beginning and is entirely different in the end? I've seen this happening in papers. And so sometimes things just fall. You might, of course, need to get back to the author and say, is it an erroneous contradiction on your part? You say this. Are you trying to say something? Is it a misunderstanding on my part? You need to get these things across and send in the comments to the editor. You need to admit your what I call relative incompetence. For instance, is it an erroneous subject? By erroneous subject, what I mean is just what happened last week. I received a paper on which had a histopathology component as well as a microbiology component. And this was sent to me because I had published something on that subject a couple of years ago. But my paper, which I had published, was 90% histopathology, 10% microbiology. This paper was 90% microbiology, 10% histopathology. I had been chosen as the referee because I was the corresponding author on that subject. So when the paper came into me, I emailed the editor and said, I cannot referee this because the emphasis in this paper is on something that I cannot understand or comment on, and so you need to send it to somebody else. And I suggested somebody who was a co-author on that paper and who is actually attending this session because I can see her face out here. So she refereed that paper. Statistics. I'm unfortunately, I must admit that I'm extremely uncomfortable with statistics, and so I can referee papers in which there is only very basic statistics, which uh, somebody with only my very low IQ can understand. If there's a lot of statistics in it, I referee the rest of the paper and I get back to the editor and say, I've looked at all of this part, but the statistics part I do not understand at all. And you rather have to have it seen by somebody else or maybe by a statistician, for the entire statistics part. Possible bias. Yes. Sometimes I say that this paper is not of interest to me, and I don't think it's a good paper, but I might be biased because, well, there are multiple reasons for bias. A recent paper that came in, I felt had not a paper in the humanities. I felt there was not much opinion in it, but the author was trying to impress the editor by using some bombastic language. I said he's just trying to impress you with big words. I don't think there's much to it. Nevertheless, I may be being biased and maybe there is a message in it. So I'd recommend you to take a second or a third opinion on this. So you have to be fair to the author. Here's something, referee comment as long as the manuscript. And this, as you can see, activated glutamate intermediate in the enzymatic synthesis of glutamine. The first author, P.R. Krishnaswamy, was my ex-boss. And in 1999, he told me about this paper, which he submitted in 1960 and was published in Journal of Biological Chemistry, JBC, which is one of the big journals. In fact, the biggest journal in biological chemistry. He told me that this paper that he submitted had referee comments which were as long as the manuscript that they had submitted. And not only was this then published, and this is excellent. What it means is, it means that the authors have taken great interest in writing this hypothesis paper. The referee has taken great interest in spending a lot of time and sending comments which are as long as the paper, which means he. And I'm saying it's he because this is Massachusetts in 1960, so it must have been a he. Okay, so he has sent in comments really desiring to improve this paper. And I was talking to Dr. PRK just half an hour ago, and he tells me that on the basis of this paper, they wrote a much larger paper in 1962, and subsequently, this data was used for something which was called, this second paper, 1962, was been called one of the classics in enzymology. And subsequently, somebody worked on this subject and got a Nobel Prize. Now, you must understand that this was a fantastic paper. This was a good paper to begin with. But because of the interest of that referee, and because the editor did not reject the paper but sent all those comments back to the authors, they were able to make it a much better paper, make it from a good paper to a great paper, a paper which ultimately led to somebody else's getting a Nobel Prize. That is what good refereeing is. Improving the standard and making a good paper into a great paper. There are certain practical difficulties to which I have no reply. And this is something, to my knowledge, this has not happened to me so far, but I'm certain it's going to happen at some stage. You as a referee get a paper which you think is really bad, it's shoddy, and you suggest to the editor that it be rejected. It's rejected. And then sometime later, you find that this rejected paper is seen without any changes in another journal. So what do you, in your position as erstwhile referee, do? The problem here is, if you are to, in the interest of science, if you want to, well, in the interest of science, I suppose you should write to the editor and a letter to the editor and say, here is this paper that you have published, but these are the flaws in the science, and what do the authors have to say about it? You could do that in the interest of science. On the other hand, is a problem that if you write all those points, the author is bound to know that it was you who had seen the paper earlier, because your comments now will be the same as what your referee comments were earlier. And then that author is not going to like it, and well, it could lead to enmity. Now, I'm going to digress at this stage and talk about open peer review. Open peer review has been blind for the last 350 years. It's over the last 15 or 20 years, there's been concept of open peer review, where the reviewer names himself, but the author cannot contact him. The author can contact the referee only through the editor, mind you. I'm told that in Europe, it's worked out fairly well, peer review. Europeans are willing to accept comments from referees even when they are named, and they do not dislike it. America, apparently, it's still not taken off, and certainly in India, it's going to take some time before open peer review takes place. One of the journals that I'm associated with, the Indian Journal of Medical Ethics, we have now gone over to open peer review in most cases, but we always confirm with the referee if he or she is willing to have open peer review. For most of my papers, most of the papers that I referee in Indian Journal of Medical Ethics, I'm okay with open peer review, but not with all of them. In National Medical Journal of India, it is still blinded, and I'm happy to be double blind out there. I don't want my name to be revealed out there. I did tell you that there is very little research being done on the subject of research integrity. And here is one exception to that. There's a journal called Research Integrity and Peer Review. It's a journal dedicated to this subject, and it's a Biomed Central journal which was started in 2015 or so. Oh, that's about the time when peer review week started. I don't know if it's a coincidence or it's linked to each other. And I noted this morning with great pleasure that my good friend Dr. Piyush Sahni, who is editor of the National Medical Journal of India, he's on the editorial board of this journal. And here's an editorial from 2020, and they talk about the limitations to our understanding of peer review. So clearly, although peer review has been around for 350 years, we still have limitations to its understanding. Here's another lovely article that I came across, and I see I've forgotten to write. It's some humanities journal, that's all I remember. And what does better peer review look like? Underlying principles and recommendations for better practice is what these 5 authors have gotten together and written about. And one of the things they say is this: editors should be able and ready to provide advice to reviewers or to referees. And I'm going to mention a specific thing. There's this one referee that I used to send papers to. Undoubtedly, in that specific subject, this person, he, she, or they, has been the best referee that I have had in that subject. I obviously cannot compare across fields such as surgery, radiation, pathology, statistics, and so on. But in this specific field, this person was the best referee. But quite often, along with those superb comments, would be one nasty comment in that. I'm not going to go into the specs of that nasty comment because that person may be listening to this and may be able to identify himself, herself, or themselves on the basis of that comment. So that'll be that occasional nasty comment, more than occasional nasty comment, in fact, at the very beginning. And it would be a problem for me because I had to then go in and delete that offending comment and then send it to the author. And there's always the fear that I might erroneously forget to delete it and send it out there, and then of course then we'd be in a royal mess. It was also a waste of my time sitting and deleting it. So after this happened a few times, I got back to the referee and said, look, I think it's not fair on your part to do this. You need to change. Your comments are excellent. Don't spoil it by adding this one line. And I must say that the referee took the advice well and has never again done that. Here are some of my pet peeves as editor, and this is linked to research integrity. And well, some people have it. One does it every time, submitting referee comments in the style of E.E. Cummings, everything in small, no caps where it's required. And E.E. Cummings was a poet who wrote a lot of his poems in small, no caps. That's his style. Okay, fine. But you're not E.E. Cummings, submit it like a proper referee. The reason I say this is if you send it to me in all small, I can't afford to send it the same way to the author because I'm doing a professional job. It's going to look like I'm being unprofessional by submitting it without capitals or without commas or without any sense of grammar. Don't waste my time. Please help me out. As you know, help me out is what the editor is coming to the referee for. So help out the editor, use caps. The second thing is do not identify yourself in the referee comments. And this I say because it's supposed to be double blind, right? And then not uncommonly, the referee sends in the comments in the Word document or in track changes. And when you send something in track changes or in Word document, your name comes all over the track. It comes in the Word document. This Word document has been created by such and such a person. And so the author immediately knows who the referee is. So every time a referee sends me a paper in this manner, I have to go and change the all the details, all the properties of the file. And that's really a waste of my or my editorial colleagues or assistants' time. So don't do that. Please pay attention. And I'm, despite pointing this out to referees, they insist on doing it because they look at it as a minute of theirs saved. What they don't realize is it's 10 minutes of mine wasted. And your time is important, I know, but let's face it, so is mine. The other thing is Nero and this neuropathologist Paulus, who was editor of Journal of Neuropathology, if I remember, Neuropathology. He says Nero is a problem. The never responding referees. Referees who accept the invitation to referee but never respond thereafter. I was inspired by the word Nero and I created the word fiddle. And fiddle is frequent inability to deliver decisions to lamenting editor. And that is referees who raise many relevant queries for the author during the initial submission and then refuse to review the revised manuscript. And so here are comments being sent in, and I can't send it to a second or a third referee because that referee is not going to understand the context of these comments. So Nero and fiddle are problems which editors have. Of course, the first problem is when you refuse to respond to the editor, or when you, the next part is when you respond, accept, and then don't send in comments, or you don't send comments in. And here is something that I must say. Please do remember that you spend months doing research and you spend weeks writing up that research and sending it to a journal, and you expect 2 or 3 or 4 referees to spend their time to referee for you free. Therefore, when you get a paper, it is your duty to return the compliment. It's not fair to say, I'm busy, I cannot referee papers. But you'll be surprised to know the number of people who do it. Wily, and I like the pun on wily. We should be unwily, I guess. But here are 5 principles of better peer review that Wiley suggests in that paper which I referred to earlier, the Humanities Journal. And he says the referee has to look for content integrity, the referee has to look for content ethics, fairness, usefulness, and timeliness. You have to submit your referee comments quick. Now here's something. This was the paper which made news 2 years ago. The New England Journal of Medicine accepted this paper on COVID, and a couple of weeks later, or even maybe earlier, they retracted it because they found that it was fraudulent data. This was not the first time this had happened. No. Jerome Cassiro, ex-editor of the New England Journal of Medicine, made a comment. If outside scientists detected problems that weren't identified by peer reviewers, then the journals failed. I and many other people disagree with him because, yes, the reviewers goofed up. There's no doubt about it. The editor goofed up, no doubt. But the fact is, there was one editor and there were 2 or 3 or 4 peer reviewers. All of them made those elementary mistakes. But once the paper has been published, it's seen by thousands or hundreds of thousands of readers, all of whom are potential peer reviewers. And so 100,000 people or 10,000 people can definitely do a better job than 2, 3, or 4. So it's unfair to those reviewers and referees, I feel. This was not the first time this had happened. Sudbo in 2006 had done the same thing to the Lancet. He published this paper, which was then discovered to be fraud and was then retracted. In the eyes of the law, you're innocent until proved guilty. I just wonder if the way forward for referees is authors and papers are guilty until proved innocent. Maybe I need you to. I'm not making this as a statement. It's the way forward for referees. Question mark. This is something you need to reflect on. I can't give you all the answers. Here's an excellent editorial that I think you guys should read from the National Medical Journal of India, and that's the conflict of interest. I'm on this editorial board. But what can COVID teach us about research integrity? And this is, of course, linked to the fact that the Lancet and the NEJM had these papers which were published. More work for referees. Referees have very little time, and I'm going to suggest more work for them. Referees may need to ask for raw data. Had they asked for raw data in the Lancet and NEJM paper, or even the Sudbo paper in the Lancet, which I referred to, it would have been obvious that there was fraud. In the Sudbo paper, which I referred to a couple of minutes ago, there were 908 patients in one study, and 250 of those patients had the same birthday. Now, had somebody asked for raw data, it would have been very, very obvious that 250 patients, every fourth patient can't have the same birthday, and therefore this must be fraud. So I think referee should ask, or may need to consider strongly asking for raw data in order to detect fraud. And also you should scur the web for preprints of the paper, because if papers are published as preprints, it is possible that someone else will have gone in and commented on it, and you'll be able to pick up good comments. Paper mills are another recent problem where people or groups get together and concoct fake data and sell it to authors who want quick papers. But this was 400 papers, all from China, all from paper mills. And the papers in question have no common authors. They also vary in disciplines, including pediatrics, cardiology, endocrinology, nephrology, and vascular surgery. And so you will understand that a guy referring a paper in pediatrics is not going to be referring a paper in nephrology. And so the same data being sent to different journals, or the same images, this was all images, Western blots which were being sent to different journals, referees are not going to know that it's been sent elsewhere. It's going to pass peer review. Should also note that paper mills have been reported to operate in other countries, including Iran, India, and Russia. So India is very much out there, one of the world capitals of paper mills, I'm sorry to say. For this, there was this letter in Nature saying, stamp out fake peer review, and what the authors from China state, journals should confidentially share each other's databases of falsified reviewers' details and of offending authors. I can understand you can share databases of falsified reviewers' details. I'm not sure about the offending authors part. Yes, I would like to say I would want to share my data of offending authors with somebody else, but what I see as a potential legal problem out here is when an author sends a paper to me as an editor, it's sent to me in confidence. There's confidentiality. I don't know with that confidentiality if I'm then allowed to inform the editors of other journals that this author is a fraud. I would want to, but I'm not certain about the legal aspect about it. Again, this is homework for you guys to do and find out, and maybe you guys can come out with solutions for this. So to recap, what do editors expect from referees? They expect a conflict of interest statement, a quick response, appropriate and relatively detailed comments, and a recommendation whether to accept or reject or to improve the paper. Other aspects such as whether there's research misconducted, suspected, whether you feel the paper is good enough for an editorial commentary, or whether you feel that they should be rushed to publication. What else do editors expect? Editors expect you to referee 2 papers for every paper that you submit to a journal. I read this somewhere. Why is the magic number 2? Because every paper that you submit is seen by 2 referees. Therefore, for every paper you submit, you should look at 2 papers. And whoever gets the credit for this, I forget who it is. But I'm going to now turn the tables and say, what do referees expect from editors? Referees expect editors to give them information on the final decision taken by the editor. I want to know whether you agree with my comments or not. I would like to know the other referees' comments so that I can learn from it. Referees expect promises, not lies. I got this paper in 2020 from a European journal saying, a good journal, a very highly respected journal, saying, we'd like you to referee this paper, and if you referee it, we will give you 1 year online access to the journal. I refereed the paper. I didn't get any email from them. So I emailed them saying, you promised me 1 year access. What happened? No response. I emailed them a second time, still no response. The next time they send me a paper, I'm not going to be interested in refereeing. Finally, I think referee should get CME points because you spend a lot of time refereeing papers. Layperson also needs to be educated about peer review because you have to start young and teach at all levels. And for this, Dr. Shubha Nagarkar at Savitribai Phule University of Pune informs me that she is at the moment writing on a couple of articles in the Marathi newspapers on the importance of on the tragedy of paper mills and on the abuse of the peer review, on the abuse of the impact factor. I have a permission to share this data with you. And here is something the Hindu often carries articles like this in the science and technology section. Refereeing has always been tough. It has just gotten tougher, like I said. And finally, Teddy Roosevelt made this statement for diplomats: speak softly and carry a big stick. That's what referees also have to do. Be diplomatic, but come out there with the truth and tell them the honest truth about their paper. And here is Elizabeth Dick, who is the terror of fraudulent scientists. She detects, she looks at blots every day and picks up similarities between unrelated papers and points out research misconduct. That's my talk for today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sanjay. That was really insightful, and I'm sure lots of people have a lot of food for thought right now about conflicts of interest and what a peer reviewer should or should not do, and what the editors expect from them. Any questions? I'm working on this form. I realized that the form is not working for sending out the YouTube video, recording of the YouTube video. You can just maybe email me. This is my email ID. You can email me your ID and I'll send across the link. Any questions? If you want to ask any questions, anybody, you can just unmute yourself, switch on your video and start introducing yourself and asking the question directly to Sanjay.
There's one question. There's one question out here, and I must say this is progress. This is growth. For the first time in 3 years, I've been able to figure out how to open up this chat box and read questions. I have to ask the coordinator to figure out what the question is. Okay, here's a question. My question to you: would you advise editors to make peer review more diverse, equitable, and inclusive? Yes, undoubtedly. If you want to get really good comments, you have to send it to people from diverse sides. I would send a paper to use a political viewpoint. I would send, if I were an editor of a political science paper, I would send one paper to a left winger and write one to a right winger to get entirely diverse comments and try to improve. And of course, it may not be easy for the editor to make sense of it, but well, that's part of the learning process also, right? And sometimes you get comments which are entirely different. You need to then put it together, distill it perhaps, and send it to the author. I have had the experience as an author of getting comments which are absolutely diverse, absolutely digressive, in fact, I would say. But yes, overall, I think it helps the peer review process. In general, in life, it's better to get diverse opinions. There's also this thing, in your community, so to say, you should get people from different views. Unless there is cross-pollination, and there's cross-pollination only when you have different people from different views, different backgrounds, and different opinions, that there is going to be growth. If everybody is going to get onto, I'm not going to go on to one nation, one language, one party, it doesn't make sense to me. There has to be diversity. Unity in diversity, right? That's what we talk about in India. So yes, there has to be diversity, including in peer review.
Thank you, Sanjay, for the answer, and thank you, Salil, for the question. That's a good question. Any other questions directly from the audience here? You can unmute yourself if you want to. Anybody who wants to ask the question to our speaker here? Yeah, so Sanjay, I have a question about sharing review comments of other peer reviewers with one particular field. I mean, do you share the comments with the reviewers? Like there are 3 reviewers of an article. Would you suggest sharing comments of all the reviewers?
Yes, I think you must. I think it's a necessity, and I think it's part of integrity, because one of the reasons you have sent me a paper to referee is because you think I'm reasonably good at it. But there is no such thing as a perfect or ideal or superlative peer reviewer. No matter how good my comments are, almost certainly the other peer reviewer will have picked up some flaw or some area of improving the paper which I would have not thought of. So I would like to see that so I can learn from it. And sometimes you realize that, you see, I don't think this has happened to me, but it's possible that you see a paper and think it's a good paper and send in good comments. And then when you get in the other person's comments, you realize that there was a fundamental flaw in the paper which you missed. So it's a learning curve for you. So you must do it. And I can't say that all journals do it, and I think it's linked to the software really. Some journals have this software where automatically when you get the editor's uh, decision, a copy of the editor's decision is sent to you that you decided to accept, reject, or whatever this paper. In that you get a copy of the other referees' comments, but it doesn't happen in all. It's software linked. I remember on one occasion, many years ago, I asked, there was this very interesting paper which was sent to me, and I sent in comments for it to be improved. And then I asked the author, I asked the editor, may I see the other referee comments? He sent it to me. And I said, these are very good comments. I had not thought of a single of those comments, and that referee had not thought of a single of my comments. So I asked the editor, I said, since I'm not an author and since I'm only a referee, can you tell me who the other referee was? And he named the person and told me something very interesting. The other referee wanted to see my comments, and when he saw those comments, he wanted to know who I was. And we are friends. That's a different story. But it was very interesting that neither of us picked up the points that the other one had. So it was learning for all of us, especially the author.
So one anecdote that I would like to share about my experience with this is a few years back, I was asked to peer review a paper for an international journal. And incidentally, when they shared the review comments with us, I mean, once you submit your review, you get to see the review comments of all the other reviewers. So we realized that one of the reviewers, who is a big name at World Association of Medical Editors, had revealed his name in the author comments. So that was when they stopped sharing all the review comments with the reviewers. I mean, the next article that I got from them for peer review, they had mentioned that it is not going to be revealed to you. Yeah. Sometimes there could be issues like that.
Yeah, okay. But I want to just take you up on something that you said. You refereed a paper for an international journal. What is an international journal? Journals are journals.
No, I'm talking about a journal which was not an Indian journal. I mean, it was not published from India. It was a Croatian journal.
Yeah, because I don't understand this concept of national and international journals. Yeah. Because the New England Journal of Medicine is a small society, right? New England is a small area.
Yeah.
So I think journals are journals. We don't talk about national or international. That's fine. Viewpoint on that.
I agree with that. Yeah. So we have another question from Aruna Karoli Marla.
Kurli Marla, she's a good friend of mine.
Okay, Kurli Marla, sorry. She asks, identification of the right journal to send an article is a challenge. Can the complexity of peer review be made more transparent?
I've not understood the connection between the two questions. Identification of journals, the appropriate journal is difficult. Yes, agreed. The next part was what?
Can the complexity of peer review be made more transparent? I mean, how, I believe you are asking about how the process is, the process of peer review, whether how they choose the reviewers. Is that what you are asking, Aruna, or would you like to unmute yourself and ask directly?
Aruna? Okay, I'm just reminded of an anecdote. Sometime in 1997, another of my ex-bosses wrote this paper, and a lovely hypothesis, and he sent this to one of the big basic science journals, and it came back. It was rejected by the editor, and he showed me the comments. One referee had said, lovely hypothesis, but the images are not good. And the second guy had said, lovely images, but the hypothesis doesn't make sense. So what does that mean? Were the images good? Were the images bad? Were the hypothesis good or the hypothesis bad? We don't know. It got rejected by that journal and we published it elsewhere. But regarding the complexity of referees, I think what Aruna is trying to say is that sometimes referees sent in, like we alluded to earlier, sent in comments which seem to contradict each other, which don't seem to make sense. We don't know why. It is not at all uncommon in my experience as an author to receive a comment from a referee who says, why don't you include such and such a paper, or why don't you refer to this in your article? And then I say, but I've done it already. Here is that reference. Here is what I refer to. That means you're not paid enough attention as a referee to that paper. Whether it means that you skim through the paper, or whether it means that you not paid as much attention as a referee, I do not know. Obviously, it means, or sometimes it can be actual human error. You see it, but doesn't strike you that you read that line, and then you miss it and put in a comment. So I suspect that's what Aruna is referring to. But peer review is essential, but not infallible. Maybe that's what we're getting at.
Yeah.
And Aruna, if we can talk offline, of course.
Yeah, so she's
Questions, yeah.
replied back saying that, yes, that's what I meant. Cannot understand what the two reviewers are looking for.
Sometimes you need to get back to the editor, and I get back to the editor very often saying, this doesn't make sense to me, please clarify. And I must admit that I can't say on almost every occasion the editor has agreed with me and said, what you say makes sense, please address this issue however you like, and I'll take care of it.
Yeah. So yeah, as authors, we are allowed to question the peer reviewer and ask them why they think that something is flawed.
Yes.
Or explain why you feel that something is not flawed.
Yes, of course. A recent paper that I published in Archives of Pathology and Laboratory Medicine was this historic paper. And this paper, I was the first author of the paper, and the comments came in. I remember the corresponding author telling me, Sanjay, you met your match. This is a guy who's going to give you a really tough time. And I looked at the comments and I said, no, I can address all of these questions. One of the things he said was he referred to sleeping beauties. You know what a sleeping beauty is in science? A sleeping beauty is a paper which, when it is published, is not noticed by anybody. And 10, 20, 30, or sometimes even 50 years after the paper is published, suddenly it comes to light and becomes the science of the day and is a hot paper. That's the problem, of course, the impact factor. You expect the paper to be hot within 2 years. That's not possible always. Bosons being an excellent example. And another example being, so this referee wrote that we had referred to sleeping beauties in this paper. And he said that sleeping beauties are not common in biology. Sleeping beauties are only used for the physical sciences. And fortunately, my understanding of history of medicine was better than that referees, although the referee gave me very, very good comments, I must say, with this one exception. And I wrote to him that the best known example of a sleeping beauty is Gregor Mendel's paper in 1865, which was discovered 35 years later. And in fact, if people talk of one example of sleeping beauty, it's from biology. So I said, your understanding of the subject is wrong, and my understanding is correct. So the editor accepted, the referee also accepted, because remember, it's a learning process even for the referee. So, but you got to be diplomatic about it. You can't go there and argue with the guy. You got to be diplomatic and you get a point across.
Thanks, Sanjay. That was a good example. Any other questions from the audience?
I might also state that you can also argue with the editor. I have had occasions where the editor has rejected the paper, and I've gotten back to, well, it's always been a him. On 3 or 4 occasions, I've gotten back to the editor and said, I think your referee has missed the point, and because the referee has missed the point, you have taken the referee's point comments and rejected the paper. I think you need to relook at it and consider it for publication. And at least once it's been, no, once, 3 times it's been, the editor has resubmitted the paper to new referees, and the paper has been published. On a couple of occasions, of course, the editor said, no, I don't think the paper is good. That's fine.
Okay. Thank you.
4 times, not 3 times, 4 times.
Okay. Yeah. So we have another question from Rekha Kumar. She asks, Sanjay, your opinions on case reports for first-time writers, not reviewers.
Your opinion on case reports of first-time writers?
Writers.
Well, I think you begin off writing with case reports or with letters. It's extremely unlikely that you're going to begin off writing a full-length paper for the New England Journal of Medicine. So you begin off with case reports. I love case reports, and I think there's a lot of messages that you can put across. The message I like to put across, the thing I like to tell my students is, when you're sitting in the OPD, you're going to be seeing only one patient at a time, not that cohort of 10,000. So you see one patient, you got a problem, you got to solve it. And that's when case reports come in. And send a message to you or give a message to you. I love case reports, there's no doubt about it. Unfortunately, in this world of evidence-based medicine, it's not very high up on the scale, and so people dislike case reports. But I'm interested in case reports, and you can publish a case report in multiple ways. Do note, it could be a case report, it could be a letter to the editor, it could be images, or you can use it to make a point of some sort.
Yeah. Also, you could check the instruction to authors of the target journal and see if they are accepting case reports or not. That's the
Yes.
first thing to do, because there are many journals which will not accept case reports. On the other side, there are many journals which publish only case reports.
Yes, that's right.
So maybe choosing the journal would be a suggestion that I would.
Yeah. But I do not publish in any of these case reports only journal. Okay, I publish in general. I'm a pathologist. I publish in pathology journals. So I publish in general pathology journals, which also accept case reports.
Yeah. So because the viewership would be much more if you publish in a journal where they publish a variety of reports, maybe
Yes,
original
right.
research or even a short communication, but they also
Yes.
publish.
Yes, again, like Salil mentioned, variety. I'd rather look at a journal which has a variety of different types of articles, not just one kind of article.
Yeah.
It gets boring.
Yeah. Any other questions? We have overshot our time, but then we'll still take in one more question if there is one. Thank you. Yeah, Dr. Rekha agrees. Any other question from anybody? Okay, wonderful. So I'll just put my email ID again. I believe the form was not functioning properly, so I'm adding my email ID again. You can reach out to me on this email ID and I'll share the link of the recording. And that's natasha@hazloconsultancy.com. And you've also seen Sanjay's email ID. Sanjay is also very approachable and agreeable to answer all your questions even after this session. Thank you everybody who attended, and I hope you had a good discussion here. Any questions? We are there to answer your questions. And if you want us to have a session on anything else that is related to publication, feel free to write to us. We will definitely want to include that in a future session. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Yeah, anybody who wants to say anything else? Even if it's not a question? Okay. I guess that's about it. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Natasha, thank you, everybody.
Thank
Cheers.
you.
Bye.